Do you believe vampires still walk among us? I'm not talking about the glittering, romanticized ones you see in movies. I mean the real ones, the ones who hide in plain sight, living quietly in the shadows between life and death. You probably think it's all just folklore, a collection of old stories to tell around a campfire. But what if I told you that I've actually met one? And what happened on that single, terrifying night still keeps me awake. This is a story I never, ever planned to tell. But after years of keeping it locked away, I feel like people need to hear it. Don't think of this as just another horror tale. Think of it as a warning, or maybe a revelation. Because I promise you, once you've looked into the eyes of someone who shouldn't exist, your view of the world is shattered forever. Like most of you, I never believed in vampires. Not really. Of course, I loved the legends, the dark, brooding myths from Eastern Europe, the cryptic stories about pale strangers who only appeared in the dead of night. But to me, they were just that, stories. Science had an explanation for everything, right? Ancient fears were just misunderstandings of decay, disease, and superstition. Everything could be explained, neatly categorized and filed away. Or so I thought. My skepticism began to crack when I started researching a series of historical disappearances for a documentary I was working on. It was a deep dive into cold cases from centuries past. And as I followed the breadcrumbs through dusty archives and forgotten records, one name kept reappearing. A nobleman, officially recorded as having died in the late 1800s. But his records, his signature, his entire identity kept popping up throughout the following decades. The 1920s, the 1950s, even into the late 70s. It was always the same name. Always the same elegant, looping signature. And most unsettling of all, the same photograph. A portrait of a man who never seemed to age a single day. At first, I was convinced it had to be an elaborate, long-running hoax. A family tradition, maybe, or a myth passed down through generations to preserve a legacy. But something deep inside me, that little voice of journalistic instinct, refused to let it go. My initial curiosity quickly spiraled into a full-blown obsession. I wasn't just intrigued anymore, I was driven. I wanted to prove it was fake. I needed asterisk to debunk it, to restore my own sense of a rational, orderly world. That obsession is what led me to the remote outskirts of a small, forgotten village in Eastern Europe. It was one of those places that feels completely frozen in time, where horse-drawn carts are more common than cars, and the old ways still cling to the air like mist. The locals were wary of outsiders, but a few whispered stories about an old, abandoned chapel on the hill. They warned me about it, their eyes wide with genuine fear. No one goes there after dark, an old woman told me, crossing herself. Of course, I just laughed it off. Me, the seasoned documentarian, afraid of ghost stories? I had my high-tech camera, a powerful flashlight, and every ounce of skepticism I could possibly carry. As I made my way to the chapel, the sun had long set, and a heavy silence descended. It was just past midnight when I finally reached the crumbling stone structure. The air was unnaturally still, almost heavy, as if the entire world around me was holding its breath, waiting. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, and the smell of old stone, damp earth, and centuries of dust hit me. It was colder inside, a deep, penetrating cold that had nothing to do with the night air. I swept my flashlight across the interior. The chapel was bare, stripped of any religious artifacts, but the walls were covered in faint markings. Symbols carved deep into the stone. They weren't crosses or any religious iconography I recognized. They looked older, more primal, almost like ancient protection wards meant to keep something asterisk and asterisk, rather than out. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Echoing from the far end of the darkened hall. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't alone. I spun around, pointing my flashlight beam down the long, empty nave. And there he was. Standing in the shadows was a tall man, dressed in a simple, old-fashioned coat that looked like it was from another century. His face was impossibly pale, like polished marble, and his eyes seemed to almost glow in the darkness, reflecting my light back at me with an eerie intensity. He didn't flinch or shield his face from the bright beam. He just stood there, perfectly still, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. My voice was barely a whisper, shaking as I asked, "Who are you?" He didn't answer right away. He just tilted his head, studying me with an unnerving curiosity, the way a scientist might examine an insect under a microscope. Then he spoke, and his voice was the most terrifying thing of all. It was calm, ageless, and filled with a strange, disturbing kindness. "You came looking for me," he said, the words echoing in the cavernous bass. "So here I am." Every survival instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get out of there and never look back. But I was frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. It was as if his gaze had pinned me to the spot. He began to walk towards me, his steps making no sound on the stone floor. As he drew closer, the beam of my flashlight passed directly over his face. For a split second, I saw it clearly. There was no reflection in his eyes, no sign of life, no warmth. Just a deep, endless void. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that there was no heartbeat in his chest. He stopped just a few feet away from me and spoke again, his voice still impossibly gentle. "We are not what your stories say we are," he said. "We don't hunt for blood. We hunt for silence. Because in this loud, chaotic world, the truth is far more dangerous than hunger." And then, it happened. The light from my powerful, fully charged flashlight flickered once, twice, and died, plunging us into total darkness. In that same instant, the presence was gone. He had simply vanished. The chapel was completely empty, silent once more. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Its screen lit up, showing no signal. My camera battery, which had been at 100%, was completely dead. And my watch was frozen, stopped at exactly 2:13 a.m. I stumbled out of that chapel and into the night, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt drained, exhausted, like he had taken something essential from me. Not blood. It was something deeper, something vital. A piece of my certainty, my belief in a logical world. To this day, I still don't know if what I saw that night was real. Maybe it was an elaborate hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the spooky atmosphere. Or maybe, just maybe, I crossed a boundary and came face to face with something humanity was never meant to understand. But I do know this: some legends exist for a reason. They persist because the truth behind them never really died out. So, I have to ask you, what do you think? Do creatures like him still walk among us, hidden behind the veils of history and shadow? Let me know what you believe down in the comments. And if you're brave enough to hear more, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because in my next story, I'll be uncovering the chilling truth behind a haunted village that completely disappeared overnight. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.